Are you assuming responsibility for other people's choices or actions? Or are you holding your team sufficiently accountable for the goals you've all agreed to? Are you showing your team that it's okay to try and fail in order to learn from those experiences? Or are you the majority of the operational responsibility because at least then you know it'll all get done? Or are you cycling through emotional and physical burnout without any respite in sight? If you feel older than your years and wonder just how much you've left in the emotional tank, and if the best you can hope for is to survive the next shift, then this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Jim and I thought it would be high time, no pun intended, at least I don't think so, that we brought founder and CEO of Hattie's Creamery, Crowell, into the studio to talk about her newest obsession, assisting restaurant owners, operators, and managers to get out of operational overwhelm so they can reclaim their time and teams. Welcome to another episode of Turning the Table. My name is Adam Lamb of Chef Life Coaching, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60. Jim.
It's good to be back. Sorry I missed last week, but looking forward to today's conversation, that's for sure. I think it's incredibly relatable and
Yeah, because it seems like rather than things slowing down, things are speeding up. We're dedicated to bringing you solutions to the hospitality's most persistent challenges. As always, we'll discuss real-world examples of what's working in the hospitality industry and give you 3 actionable ideas to help restaurant owners and managers improve employee retention rates. Remember to share this episode, follow us on your favorite podcast player, and please leave us a review. It does help others who are looking for these same solutions to find the show. Links to the videos and other things discussed can be found in the comments and the show notes. If you'd like to partner with us on Turning the Table and get in front of over 4,000 progressive hospitality professionals every week, DM either Jim or I. And we'll get to founder and CEO of Hattie's Creamery and restaurant leadership nerd, Claire Crowell, right after these messages.
Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show.
Welcome, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Hello. Thank you all so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. We are so excited about this conversation because I am pretty sure that you are not the only one that's experienced this overwhelm in managing our operations. As a matter of fact, the tropes of having gone through the lockdown and then reopening and everybody beating our doors down because they were so desperate to be in relationship with one another. And most of us were just hanging on just by pure grit, forcing our smiles and welcoming everybody through the door. And that only works for a little while, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So why don't you give us an idea of your particular journey in the hospitality industry and how you've come to this clear decision that you want to coach and assist other operators to learn the secrets that you've uncovered?
Yeah. Again, thanks so much for having me. I, like so many people, started really young in the industry. My family business was restaurants. So I worked from age 12, just all through the restaurants, and then started in leadership. I want to say I was 22. And that was back in 2008. So y'all can do the math, but, so I just, there wasn't, a lot of resources out there at the time. I felt, I was very much learning on the job, Googling, what cost of goods sold were, and like all this language that was being thrown at me that I didn't know. And then also trying to be a good leader, and then going through all of those of leadership that one does when they're young in the business and trying to figure things out. We went from one restaurant. I was about 9 or 10 restaurants when I was COO, and also was chief people officer kind of in there as well. And so I feel like I've done, outside of being an executive chef, pretty much everything in the business. I also own my own business, Hattie Jane's Creamery, which we started in 2007 as a side project, and then stepped away from the restaurants full time and solely operate Hattie Jane's to help it grow. Post pandemic, I think I started that, or stepped away about 2021.
Wow. And so you were COO, and chief people officer at the same time for a 10-unit restaurant group?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was COO and which included HR for a long time. And that's very typical of independent restaurant, is kind of you do a little bit of everything. And then after the pandemic, that became so people heavy, that my director of operations, we sort of divided and conquered. He came and stepped into COO, and I focused solely on the people from basically 2020-ish until I stepped away in 2021.
Got it. Wow. Well, the concept of some of this overwhelm thing, I mean, hearing you talk about wearing multiple hats in a growing family multi-unit business, a side project that's now turned into a multi-unit business, a family and all that kind of thing. I mean, if there's anyone that understands what some of this stuff is about, it's probably you.
You throw in kids, and then it just, escalates. So I definitely intimately know the experience of stress, overwhelm, and also just overcommitting and out of a place of wanting to genuinely do so many things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've fallen in the same situation. Great intentions paved the way to someplace that's not very nice. But I think one of the things that surprised me in our conversations before the show was this idea that you really didn't want to be lonely anymore. Like you felt like you were kind of alone out there in the wilderness, even though your father and family have been involved in this business. I think not to put words in your mouth, but you felt like you didn't necessarily have any resources or know where to go for any of that stuff. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Especially, in 2008, the online community has really obviously blossomed since then. But I really didn't have a sense of I had, of course, family built in, mentorship, but as far as, we were also building a company together. So there were a lot of things that we didn't know together. So, even though he was an experienced business person, the restaurant industry was new to us, especially when we started to iterate and repeat concepts, and that changes how you do so many things. So I really did feel desperate for some sense of community and other people to reach out to. And at the time, Nashville was really not the food city that it is now. So there wasn't really a whole lot of people that I knew in the business that were doing similar things. Now I've built my community here locally, but and I still sense when I speak to young people that are entering into this business, it's still a lot of reinventing of the wheel happening, and a lot of I don't know who to turn to, where to go. And that is what I really want to dig into as I go down this path.
Yeah, I was speaking to a dear friend of mine, Chef Andy Husbands from Boston, who long time ago had a couple of very successful restaurants in the Back Bay of Boston, and then him and his buddy discovered their passion for barbecue. So they went all in on this, got their ass kicked several years in a row, going to the competitions. And then decided they were going to start opening up barbecue restaurants. And they opened up one, then another, and then a third. And at the third, and he says, so funny, he's like, people told me when you get to the third, nothing works anymore. And then when you get to the sixth, nothing works anymore. And he's like, oh, I'm a chef. That's not going to happen to me. And sure as sugar, the third restaurant he came up to, everything started falling apart because the people that he had surrounding him were basic independent restaurateurs without multi-unit experience. So I'm curious if that was kind of the same thing that you kept bumping your head up against as well, as it started you grow one concept and now growing a second concept up to 4, you're getting ready to open up your 4th location. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I'm laughing as you're saying that because that was 100% our experience. Going from 1 to 2 was okay, and that was really before I got into leadership. We had to, I would say it's okay, but when my dad listens to this, I know he was burning the candle at both ends because they were both small. So it wasn't really, he was GM essentially, an owner of 2 locations. And now that I'm a kid, I was going, how did you do that and coach soccer? Because I'm doing that too. And he gave me good wisdom, which was you got to be in the right place at the right time and no more. And be able to walk away when you don't need to be there, which leads into this whole conversation. And of course, he also has, my mom, who was, the backbone of everything that we did as a family. But yeah, when we hit 3, we started going, oh, that's when you really have to think about the I guess, to use a scary word, the liabilities that you might be open to as you expand into more, a larger staff, trying to build consistency, not, even if it's different concepts, consistency in how you operate, and also menu, and it just becomes more about systems, which for some people, they don't like that.
Right.
It can become a dirty word. Corporate kind of dirty word, but you kind of have to balance that because it becomes essential, or you end up in legal situations or with a poorly executed concept or business. So
yeah, at the very least, at the very worst, you go through something like that. It's hard to pull your head up for quite some time. I mean, there's probably lots of folks who ended up on the outside of this industry because they failed and don't even know why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about how many times it's interesting, Adam, that you mentioned the 3 location, 6 location, that sort of the growing pain type milestones, I guess, because I mean, I've had that same conversation with so many people, whether it's in management or in ownership, or there's those like I said, those milestones that you get to where all of a sudden you have to learn to operate differently, and it can be both, I think, really challenging and also very overwhelming because it's a a different way of operating. I mean, that was the biggest learning curve for me in management when I went from being, I think, Adam, we've talked about this in the past, going from management of 1 location to management of 3 and then 5 and then 7. I mean, it was a learning curve every single time.
Right. And I guess my question is like, when do you get sick of the learning curve, right? I mean, that's a great reason to keep expanding and building skill sets. But I also recognize that that's debilitating, man, after a while. It's like, when does the merry-go-round slow down? So Claire, I'm imagining that now, you've been working within this family-owned organization, 10 restaurants. You discovered that you were basically an introvert in an extrovert world, and you thank your dad for kind of pushing you a little bit to get out of that shell. And then you decide in the midst of all that you're going to start another side project that all of a sudden takes off. Was there an particular incident or moment where you realized that, like, I can't keep going on like this. I got to figure out a different way of doing this?
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple incidents along the way when you look back. The first we spoke about before, and that was just realizing that I do need the quiet time to work on projects that I was starting to get. I can feel my shoulders rising. I would put like a do not disturb Post-it note on my laptop. This is in my early 20s, because I was just trying to focus and get things done. And the constant interruption was really stressful for me. And then finally, at some point, just realizing, I just can't operate like this. I need to give myself permission to have 1 or 2 hours a few times a week to do the admin work, to build the handbook, to build the training system. I can't do that in the open. I can't focus like that. And then once I clicked over that thought process was, a game changer to be able to just kind of orchestrate my day differently and not have this expectation to always be visible, but being visible at the right time. And then another one is worth mentioning was, it seems like I only have 2 kids, but I feel like I was always pregnant opening. And, so, and we had openings around the time I was having my second. And so I did a few, but my very first, we were opening our 3rd restaurant, and that is a next level, and we about 7 to 8 months pregnant, and it's been an hour from where I lived. I was a new director of operations, and so I was taking on that multi-unit role for the first time, and then had to fire the GM that we had hired pretty quickly for HR reasons, and took over as GM in the first month. And at that point, I really was about to have my baby, and just crying on my way home, the hour drive the whole time, going, I'm doing too much, and I probably don't need to be. I need to rely on, I have very capable people on my team that are more than happy to step up. You know, and I was a large pregnant, like I was very, you know, taxing, and just that being a hurdle for me, looking back and going, gosh, that was just really silly that I waited that long. I do think a lot of women that are, you know, they want to prove that they can do it, which is true, but all people want to, and let them. So that was a turning point as well.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this Post-it note on your laptop.
So embarrassing to think about now.
Well, because again, you know, I find this happens a lot in our conversations on this show, where I find myself reflecting or thinking about what did I do? How did I work through that when I was in a similar type position? But I guess what I'm curious about is, how do you help either new leaders or leaders that you work with now to work through that in a maybe more positive, I don't know if that's the right word, but in a more productive or better way for them? Because everybody's got their own way of managing that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, I hear so often, and I think we all have been in this position or heard about it, that management in our industry are so sometimes stuck with, I'm on the floor for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and then I go home and do all my admin at home, because they either feel guilty about doing it at work, or they can't find the time, or the place is too busy, or whatever. So how do you help new leaders now work through that and manage their time or their workload better?
Yeah, I always start by asking questions like, you know, because everybody, like, to your point, everybody's different, and so few of us have like true office time, and you're getting inundated with calls and emails from people that do work 9 to 5s, but that's during your peak time. And that's what's so interesting and nuanced about our industry, is this, when you get to leadership level, that you're just constantly being sort of pushed in all directions because of this friction between our world and what seems like everybody else's world. And so I'll just ask first, like, you know, what does your schedule look like? When are your busiest times? You know, internally within our family group, we have a downtown location that's constantly busy, and then other locations that are more neighborhood, that have more of a regular ebb and flow. So that really does dictate. And I was recently coaching a young lady that runs a very popular place out here, and she's very much like me, introverted, but just a go-getter, and really wants to prove herself to her boss and her community. And, you know, so I'm just asking, like, when do you really need to be there? That's the first question. Like, when do you really actually need to be there versus what do you think the expectation is? And they also have to, you know, if you're working for somebody, is like, what is your boss's actual expectation? What did they tell you? Have you asked them? And that was a challenge for this recent person, was, you know, her wanting to very much prove that she was all things, you know, to this, her boss, because he was putting a lot of trust in her. So, you know, that's getting a really clear understanding of your expectation. Is it a reasonable expectation, or is it a not reasonable expectation? And then coaching on how to communicate if it is unreasonable. Like, hey, these are the things I have to do, bills, schedules, that invisible work that is time consuming and takes a lot of focus time. It can take me 3 hours to do it if I'm doing it out in the open, or it can take me 1 hour to do it if I'm doing it in focus time. So, you know, and painting that picture, especially if in this case, the boss wasn't a restaurant person. It was somebody that had done this for our community, and bought a restaurant and then handed it to her. So understanding that, but I want to urge operators of any level of experience to really think about place at the right time, and then scheduling that time to really do the focus work so that you can get it done and get it over with, or and be mentally free to engage with your team or the guests without this devil on your shoulder saying like, bills need to be paid, the schedules need to be made, and everything's late, and emails are piling up, and all of those things.
So in listening to you, Claire, there's a couple things that popped up for me, but I don't want to lose the thread of this, because I know that you've got a few other challenges for operators that I want to leave space for, because I think these questions are incredibly powerful. But you mentioned once you attain a leadership level. And my question to you is, what does that mean? Like, I've just become a floor manager or a lead server. Am I now in leadership? Or should I actually be looking at my job in that particular way? At what point in my career trajectory am I actually in leadership and have to start thinking as a leader?
Good question.
Yeah, I 100% feel like you could be a leader at any position. I have a guy, one of my favorite people I've ever worked with, was a dishwasher in 2000, or not dishwasher, a busser in when he started working for us in 2000, and I want to say 9, and he still is. And he is the best employee, and he's a leader to everybody on the team because of how he shows up for work. So certainly you can be a leader, and there are people that are leaders without even really owning that role. They just, people want to, because of their personality, because of their work ethic, whatever it is. But certainly, on the more technical side, is once you are put in a role that has any kind of responsibility above and beyond typical job, like a lead server, lead bartender, is a pivoting point to start thinking about operating differently, how you handle others differently. Your relationships have to be different. The way you conduct yourself, frankly, 100% of the time has to be different on and off shift, or preferably isn't different, right? But it's just like you have to think of yourself as a leader within a community, because everybody is watching. I don't mean to be creepy about that, but they are.
Sure.
And I think that coming up in a family business and always wanting to be, we were raised really well in terms of, work ethic and that expectation to be a kind of a beacon in the community, that really in a family business, like everybody, your whole family, not just your company, is being judged by how you act, which is an extra layer, which can feel like pressure. But also, for me, it's been a guiding light of like, I really like to slack on this one thing, but I can't, and I won't, because it's going to reflect on me, my dad, my sister, and our company, and and our standing in the community. So I do think you have to lead with that. Like, how does this look to everybody else, and how's it reflecting on me and everybody in the restaurant?
Some of those comments about leadership are, I love that you have that viewpoint of people, and the fact that the example that you used is a dishwasher as a leader. I
said dishwasher, but it was busser. Yeah.
But that's just amazing, right? Because it's such a good reminder that leadership thing, it's not about title, it's not about pay rate, it's not about level of responsibility, it's about how you interact with people. Yeah, so I don't know, I think that's actually really powerful.
You used an example, Claire, a little bit ago of a manager you were working with, and she really wanted to show up as being like capable of doing the job. And I'm just curious, in your experience, how much does the specter of misogyny or the shadow of patriarchy, as the way the industry used to be, And I'm saying used to be in a hopeful kind of
Sure.
like, how much do you think, like, it might not necessarily be explicit, but do you think that there's still kind of this implicit bias towards the feminine in our workforce, that they feel like they have to be, the best, including the best beyond all men as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am fortunate in my upbringing that these questions did not occur to me until I was really out in the world, because it was not a factor in how I was raised in business
Correct.
or sports or anything. And Huge credit to my parents on that. And my dad's a traditional guy, but he is a champion of women, and a lot probably because his first two kids were girls, and we're both strong personalities. But yes, and like I said, I didn't really get that until I was really leadership, and I would be in group meetings, and they would introduce themselves to my dad, and I'm the one running the company, and I would not even get a handshake.
Wow.
And and those types of things where I'd be like, and I am, so in those little situations, you're like, okay, I'm just seen as an assistant.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. That's
I know.
That's
well,
terrible.
it is funny looking back, and it's been a long time, but
sad more than
for sure.
Yeah, but I don't, don't want to speak for anybody else, but
sure.
And it's hard to parse, your motivations, but certainly there is probably some subliminal thought process of, I've really got to be at X level to be taken seriously. That is a conversation I have with young women a lot, and I probably have it with young women more, just because I tend to coach a lot more young women. Hattie James, being an ice cream brand, just seems to naturally attract. I have several males, but it seems to attract more females. I don't know if that's because we're a women-owned business, or if it's just because it's like our brand kind of look is very, acute. But anyway, I really cherish that. But we do talk about those types of things quite often, of wanting to be taken seriously and wanting to be seen as an authority figure. I'm not 100% sure that most of the guys that traditional male have really questioned that as much. And that's something that I certainly I could see. There's some guys that I have coached in the past where, they're just young and they want to be, seen as an authority, but that is a conversation I always seem to have with young women.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Jim?
Well, yeah, I think the work that you're doing, like I said before, is very powerful, and it's really, really cool. What, I guess, is there a specific piece of, just to kind of continue on that a little bit, is there a specific piece of advice that you give young leaders in general about that, maybe this authority thing, or how to get into a sort of a position of, where they can start to make an impact? Is there specific things that you find every time it's like, here's my go-to piece of advice for people? I always think about the, advice that I try to give in certain scenarios, or whenever things come up, I go, okay, well, what was I thinking when I was 22-year-old me?
Right.
So what advice do you give 22-year-old you that you also give to new leaders in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I do tend to, I think that it's a fine line between yourself out there and saying yes to things that are going to bring that level of authority, but being really intentional about that, and to avoid and sidestep overcommitment. And I kind of straddle the two mentalities because I am an elder millennial, or geriatric millennial, as they were called. But I do have, I have a traditional sense of upbringing, but also an understanding of boundaries, which is a popular topic amongst the millennial and now the Gen Z. And I think that there is a lot to say for having stronger boundaries, but also a lot to say for going above and beyond and making your name when you're young. So you don't have to do it when you do, if you do have a family, or if you just later on, you kind of can afford a little bit more flexibility when it really counts. But would I go back and tell the 22-year-old me to say yes to every board that I was asked to be on and to chair every event that I was asked to do? Absolutely not. I ended up having to drop out of a few because I was just I was saying yes to too many. So I would coach somebody to be more strategic about what groups they join or what things that they're involved in outside. I think those have tremendous value. Build yourself as a person in your community of stature or authority, or to be relied upon or seen as a leader, but be very, very careful. And whatever you say yes to, you're saying no to something else, whether it's time with a significant other, time with your dog, whatever it is. But I don't want us to go too far. If we say no to everything, then you're going to lose some significant traction in building up your career. If that's where you want to be, awesome. But if you're trying to get here, you're going to have to engage on a different level.
Yeah, people will stop asking at some point, right?
Yeah,
if your answer is always no, it's like, well, we'll take a pass on her. Claire, you also have some very specific viewpoints or beliefs around the hiring process, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that, because I think it's one of my main mistakes is as an early hospitality professional is not trusting my team enough. And I don't know if necessarily I was making the cardinal sin of hiring more me's, so that everybody has the same viewpoint, or I was active. It took me a while to actively cultivate diversity in a group so that so that the skill sets were such that we could manage everything, but not necessarily be siloed in one person, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So this is where I kind of jokingly call myself the restaurant leadership nerd, because I really love organizational psychology. I dive deep into like the data and research, and follow a lot of that kind of world of not just thought leaders, but like backed up science-based evidence type of things, and not necessarily just like the whatever is trending, which trending they can obviously be this one and the same, but I always get frustrated often when I'm listening or reading that I thought this doesn't quite work in restaurant world, and how is that? And that's why I hope to be some sort of translator. So one thing that we thinking through the conversation today was we talked about interviews. I've been talking a lot on in the LinkedIn space, if you will, about interviews, because that is an area that I think we often just wing it. And certainly I think in a more corporate setting, you can get too data focused. But most of my career was spent, tell me about yourself. What do you like to do outside of work? That kind of thing. And then the danger of that is you end up hiring more yous. Oh, you like to do, this, and then you riff and like, I really liked that person. We really got along. And not that there's anything wrong with getting along, but what are they actually bringing to the table? And are you starting to homogenize your team based on superficial things that don't really have any meaning to the actual job? So what the research tells us now is two things are really way more effective. And that's one, what's the kind of jargon is situational judgment questions, which if you break that down, it's very simple. It's like you're painting a picture. How would you handle this scenario? You're really busy on a Saturday night. You just triple sat. Somebody's asking you to drop drinks off, and you hear your manager calling runners. How would you handle this scenario? That's better than tell me about a time when, because also data shows a lot of people make that up, and sometimes it's not quite relevant to your restaurant. So
Right.
writing questions that are situational to your restaurant, and it can be, front of house, back of house, whatever, are much more effective to really get into their psyche. And you're keeping them on their toes, as far as like thinking through, and you just kind of rate it 1 out of 5, of how you felt about their answer. And the second part is, and a lot of people that might not like this, is doing it in a structural way. And that is structural, meaning the same questions for the same group of people every time. And that's really helpful, especially when you're doing like a new restaurant and you're evaluating a whole bunch of people at one time, because then you're really comparing apples to apples instead of like, one restaurant, one manager's asking these questions and one's asking those. And I'm laughing because this is how I did it for the longest time.
That's how a lot of people do it.
Yeah, because it feels natural, and you're trying to get a gut feel. And my gut's great, and I always, does your gut always lead you to the right hire? So
No.
having those, and I'm the first to admit, absolutely not. And having kind of like a structured system of, for servers or all front of house, however you want to group it, we ask these set of questions. That's great. I'm working on a template to put out there for. I like taking a deeper level and also taking these and breaking them into to reflect your core values. That's how we do it at Hattie Jane's now, is like we have our 4 core values and 2 to 3 questions per value that speak to that. And trying, especially since I am hiring a lot of people who have never worked before. Or maybe they've babysat or done some lawn care, but really have not had a customer facing position. So I'm just trying to get a sense of mentally where they're at in terms of resourcefulness, cleanliness, friendliness, because we'll take those building blocks and go from there.
Can you tell us what those 4 core values are?
For Hattie Jane's, they're friendliness, and we call it being obsessively clean, and very important around dairy, any food, but especially dairy, and resourcefulness, and personal growth. And my kind of trick, I really wish I knew where I first heard this. And I know I heard it somewhere. I can't take full credit, but was thinking of, me and my 2 partners went and sat down and thought about our very best employees and thought, like, what do we love about them? They are super friendly. When someone walks in, they're making eye contact. They work clean, they make something and they clean up. They try to answer their own questions. So resourceful, or, if we're out of something, or if someone asks a weird question about an ingredient, they try to find it instead of just saying, I don't know, or let me call my manager. And then we as a leadership team are very invested in personal growth for these kids. For most of my managers have never managed before, and then personally as well. So that's a really key thing for us.
Amazing. It's really cool to hear how you have, obviously the core value, but then here are the 3 or 4 things that we mean by this. I've spent a lot of time with companies that they've kind of got the tagline or sort of the keyword part down, right? But the ability to really back that up, I think, and how you've used the example of your best ever employees is great.
I think a lot of people that are, I think a lot of people in independent, especially if they're like corporate burnouts that land in an independent environment, you can really like, this stuff, like it's like poster fodder.
Right.
So I really wanted to think about it, like how, if we're going to do these and put them on paper, like how are we going to incorporate it so it feels natural? So we use it in our job descriptions. We do use it in our training. But I guess my advantage is working with so many clean slates and green employees, is that I want them to be things that they can take anywhere.
Right.
And that they, I hope, one of my core drivers for the ice cream business is that we're hopefully helping with the pipeline. that is
Sure.
struggling in the greater business of the restaurant industry. So I see all of these employees as potential restaurant employees. They may go off and do a million other things, but maybe one of them every once in a while will get bit by the bug and stay. And I can pass that on to the next employer and be of service to the industry in that way.
Claire, I know you kind of laughing a little bit at the Post-it note on your laptop.
Yeah.
I used to actually put that Post-it note on my door.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of that is as I grew a little bit mature, is it was two-sided, and I plasticized it, and the other side said, "In meditation, come back in 20 minutes."
Right.
But you also have a personal note to all your fellow hospitality professionals. If you're not using Post-it notes, how else are you escaping the distractions of the day? I guess I would say.
Are you asking me how I do it, or how?
Yeah.
I
Do
would
you have something to say about push notifications?
Oh, push notifications. Yes, I do. I hate them. I encourage everybody to turn them off. We're all inundated so much, and credit to being able to bear children. That maternity leave was really the catalyst for me. Was just going, I'm going to unsubscribe from all these emails, one, and two, turn off all these notifications. I really, really did do that. I did it on a certain level with my first child, Hattie. And then with Eliza, I learned a lot. And I was like, I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this maternity leave and really be present, because I didn't give myself that grace when I was had my first child. So I went full on. So she's turning 7 in a couple of weeks. So fully everything except for text and phone. And I use that do not disturb mode often, even with the phone. I guess my little trick would be, if you have worries, like obviously I can't just, my phone is off right now, but I don't typically turn it off, but because I got school that could call me, but they can also call my husband or the grandparents. Sure. And I do, this is the thing, like I'll see all this stuff on LinkedIn or through podcasts that cater more to the 9-to-5ers or the office, like, that we just don't have that luxury. We have a business that literally can catch fire, and that's not unlikely. I mean, it's hopefully not likely, but it's not out of the question, right? Things, very serious emergency things can happen. So if you're in that leadership position, make that little group for do not disturb of like who can get through, and it'd be a very small group is what I would encourage that to be, absolutely necessary. And because that does a lot to our brains scientifically, like that constant inundation, and not only the distraction and like the overuse of the endorphins that we get, but also the amount of time it takes you to reset on the task that you're doing is ridiculous. I don't want to misquote, but it's like many minutes it takes you to actually fully refocus on whatever you're doing. There's a lot of data now about multitasking and how terrible it is for us. Well, Adam, you're like really going like this. So I feel like
because there's anybody who says that they're really good at multitasking is bullshitting themselves. Yeah. Right? Because now you're doing lots of stuff mediocre. And I've just become so aware of my propensity to do deep dives and stuff, like close my office door and really focus in on doing research and stuff like that. And someone just walking into my office and trying to pull, like I have to pull myself completely out of what I'm doing to refocus to this particular problem or what's on fire in the moment. And it would take me, I think your statistics, like anywhere between 2 to 4 hours to actually get back to that same focus. And for me, it's incredibly disruptive to my neural pathways. And not only that, it's also, Jim and I talk about this a lot, this idea of that the restaurant industry, hospitality industry reinforces our addiction to instant gratification, like that dopamine hit. Got to have the dopamine, got to get the dopamine hit. And push notifications are just that. It's the gamification of our lives. And if anybody out there in listening to this doesn't think that they are ruled by corporations, go a day without your phone and see how nervous that makes you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think
And
getting that bird's eye view is really important.
And it should piss people off.
Yeah.
It really should. I mean, something that was kind of promoted to us is like, we're connecting community. Oh yeah, that's great, until that transcends everything else that's going on in your life, including the real community that you're in service to in your organization. So that's my soapbox moment. So sorry.
No, I appreciate that. And I like, like you're bullshitting, I would bullshit myself for a long time with this whole like myth of the multitasking. And
right.
I gotta credit, my husband is so natural at this. I'm so jealous. I'm so like organized mentally, where I have to really like give myself systems to be organized, because my brain just naturally is actually going everywhere.
Yeah.
And, but he's usually the one that reels me back in, and he'll say like, you could only do one thing well at a time. Just do that and then do the next thing. And like, I'm like, well, duh. But that's how he actually lives his life, as opposed to me, where I'm like trying to force myself to do that.
Well, and I spent 35, 40 years in commercial kitchens where there is so much input going on at a certain time. And especially if you're in any type of management position, there's easily 3 or 4 things happening at the same exact second while you're trying to, get this push out the pass. And it wasn't until I took a step away from the industry that I realized that what a toll that took on my brain chemistry. Like what do I do without that now? And it was probably, more than, I'm not going to, the restaurant industry didn't do anything to me. Everything I did in my life, I did as a choice. So I'm not going to like give that up and say the industry did this or that, but it surely made it easier for me to, like, at the end of the night, wonder what the hell am I going to do with all this pent up energy now? Because I've been doing this for 10, 12 hours and I can't just go home with that. So what happens in the interim? And it took me a long time to realize that, a walk is as good as a trip to the bar anytime.
Yeah, just to let yourself come down, for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's adrenaline and it's fun most of the time.
Yeah,
for sure. And so Claire, we want to make sure that there's some takeaways specifically for people that are listening. I think we had talked a little bit about them prior to the call, and we've covered a couple of them, I think, right? Push notifications being one of them, some structured interview being another, and I believe the third was core value.
Yep.
Revisiting the core value process. Is there anything you want to add on any of those, or to kind of drive those home for people?
Yeah, if I had to probably cherry pick the one that's most important, I think that really assessing yourself and what you're letting get through is where it all starts. And then these other things can kind of come into place, because if you are constantly being disrupted, whether it's through technology or what have you, or, yourself getting in your own way. Adam, you said, for a long time that you had a hard time trusting your team. Well, that's the next step, is building your team up so that you can step away. That is a big coaching thing that I've run up again and again. So many of us start as doers, and then all of a sudden we're leaders, and it's really hard to click over because you were so good at doing it that you became the leader. And this is so true in all types of industries.
Yep.
I think that the tech industry has really struggled with this, right? Because I'm really great at coding doesn't mean I'm a great leader. That's a hard shift for a lot of people. Anyway, so that and understanding that the development of your team is what releases you to be more free and to have the bandwidth, first eliminating distractions and then developing others. And that just pays off in so many ways. It helps them, it helps you, it helps the company, and not to hold on too tight. And this is me coaching myself. It's like, don't hold on too tight to things that someone else will do it just as well or better. And if they're not doing it just as well, are they coachable to get to that level? And it's worth the time spent. And that's always what I hear a lot, is like, it's just so much faster to do it myself. But for how long? Until you're burnt out.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah.
And are you currently Like your coaching is taking what form? Is it more one-on-one, small groups? Are you taking on full organizations?
Well, I've done mostly one-on-one. Well, I did do it for an organization recently. I am, I don't know if I'm quite ready to fully announce it, but I am working on pivoting this into a platform based on that, getting out of the weeds and I'm building a website basically that'll have a lot of this built in, and templates, guides. My dream is to build a community out of that where people can come and learn from each other. Because that's what I wanted. I want to basically build the website and platform that I wanted when I was 20. And maybe that resonates, maybe it doesn't, but that's the direction I want to go with that.
Yeah, I definitely want to encourage folks to check out Claire's website, which the link is in the chat in the show notes, clairecoaching.com, in which she already has several free assets that you can download for free. You got to give up your email address, of course, but but they're really suited to like really hitting you. So it's something you can implement right away, and it's not long esoteric blog article that you're trying to pull the threads out of it. No, she lays it right out. So congratulations on that work, and thank you very much. Yeah. Speaking from somebody who's still heavy in the industry, appreciate everything that you're doing. And congratulate you not only on building 2 successful businesses, but then now taking on a 3rd, as well as a family. Like, sure, why not? What else is there to do today?
Well, that's the beauty of having a great team, honestly. You can do it because I have a great team. Yeah.
Way to nail it. Way to nail it right at the end, Claire. Right? Because you can't do it by yourself.
You guys. No, you can't. You can't. I couldn't. You can't. For sure.
Yeah. Jim,
thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate this conversation.
Oh, Claire, it's been a blast. Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's been great to have you. Thanks so much.
Really appreciate all your insight and your wisdom, and bringing it to the listeners. And we'd love to have you back at some point, because we want to check in and see how this community that you're growing is actually taking hold.
Awesome.
And
I'll keep you posted.
And you can consider us part of your tribe, please.
I absolutely do. Y'all have been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And that's it for this episode of Turning the Table, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table with me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. We're on a mission to change the food and beverage industry for the better by focusing on staff mental health, physical and emotional well-being, by proactively measuring and managing staff workloads. Join other hospitality professionals co-creating the hashtag New Hospitality Culture by subscribing to our weekly newsletter at www.turningthetablepodcast.com/news. In every edition, you'll find innovative solutions ready to test and validate in your operation this weekend. Plus, listen to exclusive bonus content just for you. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Turning the Table Podcast. If you found value in this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Give us a star rating. It helps other hospitality professionals just like you find the show. Or better yet, grab the show link and share it with a friend or colleague who you want to see succeed. Thanks for stepping in and speaking out for an industry, craft, and fraternity that serves us all. Remember, retention is the new cool, y'all. This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, Adam Lamb, and Jim Taylor. Turning the Table is a production of Realignment Media.